Welcome back to their episode of the Startup Therapy Podcast. This is Ryan Rutan, joined as always by my friend, the founder and CEO of startups.com, Will Schroeder. Will, founders are probably the only people I know who can work 80 hours a week, beat the odds just to exist, and still feel behind. Why? Because our expectations are unhinged, man. Like today, let's spend some time talking about like the single fastest way to improve founder happiness and decision making, which is just some recalibration.
Yeah.
Like if you go back in time, like how reasonable were your expectations when you entered the startup space?
I gotta say, maybe by accident, I started with such low expectations going into my startup career. And I'm gonna get into some detail just so folks can really appreciate when I say this. But I started with such low expectations that any kind of forward progress was like holy home run. So to give you an idea where I was by the time I had started my first company, mind you, I'm 19, I'm in college. At that time, my thing, I was living in the dorms at Ohio State. My thing was I would write your term paper,
Oh
whatever
yeah.
your term paper would be, on literally any topic in under a half hour, which is bananas, for the cost of a pizza.
Yes.
If you would buy me a Papa John's pizza, it was like $10. Like that,
Uh-huh.
that was my going rate for my
Yep.
consulting output. Now, the irony was I had never written a term paper of my own in my life, right? But I was just a good writer. So I knew how to write flowery words.
Yep. I'll write for other people.
Exactly. It was
I'll
always
write to
way
get
better
paid.
than
I
that
won't write
person
for
was going to write.
grades, but I'll write for pizza.
Right, right. And so anyway, that's where I was at. And it's funny we should say that because we've told the story before where like I had built a website for ribs for a $500 gift certificate for a rib place.
I did mine for a $1,500 tab at Victorian's Midnight Cafe, which never expired because I think it was, and it never expired. I think they forgot to track it at some point because I was just like 3 years later, I'm like, I'm just thinking about the price of a grilled cheese. I must have eaten 500 of these things at this point. There's no way I still have money left with these guys.
There is definitely a time. It's funny that you and I were basically selling into the same
Yep.
local small business pool of Columbus, Ohio back then. And there was a time where I walked into a restaurant. It was Damon's, the place for ribs. And I'd convinced the manager to let us build a website for them. This was like in 96. And in exchange for this $500 tab, right, for food. And I remember going back to the office and explaining to the team that I just sold a website for $500 of rib value,
Yeah.
and it was a high five fest. Everyone was so pumped up, like they could not believe we could make rib money
Rib money.
with our capabilities, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Cause you can see that story going the other way. Like at this point, like you founders hearing this, they're like, oh, he goes back and he tells the team and they're like, it's Jack coming home and telling his mom he sold the cow for 3 magic beans, right? No, sir. Food is
No,
food.
it's slow. So I say this to say to put some color around this. That was my level of expectations. Now, the funny
Yeah.
thing to that, this is like circa 96, going into 97. A year later, in one of the most dramatic turn of events ever, we would have the biggest lopsided agency wins in history.
Uh-huh.
We won a $250 million a year piece of business that would enable us to go
That's a
public
lot of
years later,
ribs.
right? Like,
That's a lot of ribs.
and I remember when I was up there on stage, because this is like back then, big agency pitches. But I remember being up there on stage at Eli Lilly that we were pitching in Indianapolis, thinking, I'm pitching Lilly right now. And this is a multi-billion-dollar, like top of the food chain Fortune 500 business. But like 9 seconds ago, I
Yeah.
was selling these same services
Yeah.
for a $500 gift card.
I had to wash a barbecue sauce off my hands from the ribs that I just ate from my last paying gig. Oh, it's amazing.
But here's why we're talking about this. We're talking about it because when founders go into this business, the business of startups, I think our expectations are so incredibly broken.
Yeah.
And they're so malformed so many times that when we get into this business, we start building these businesses, we are wildly disappointed.
Yeah.
And I think it's a broken setup.
It is. I think that's why it's so important to talk about this today.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just that our expectations are wrong. It's like, okay, so what? Like when I think about it, our happiness is really just kind of a math problem. And it's reality divided by expectations.
Right,
So
right.
when we get the denominator wrong, it causes a lot of trouble.
And I tell people all this all the time. I said, your happiness is proportionate to your expectations.
That's it.
If your expectations were sky high, you're likely not happy because you weren't able to achieve that. Now,
Yep.
I'm not saying let's all go for super low expectations just so we can be
Yeah.
happy. There's
Yeah.
a calibration to be had here, right? But
Sure.
that's what we'll talk about. And I think for a lot of folks, there's an entitlement that comes with this.
I think that's part of it.
And we'll talk through that. Like, what are you not entitled to? What are you entitled to, et cetera?
Yeah.
But I think overall, if I look back on, a 30-year plus career, the highlight of everything has been whenever I achieved something, it was so much more than I felt entitled to. And we'll talk about this, but I have a strong feeling about entitlement, right? And so for me, you are entitled to what you earn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, we'll talk about that.
Yep.
But I think that for me, I always felt like when I earned something, I was over the moon because I never thought I was actually going to get it.
Right.
If anything, Ryan, if I look back, and I have countless memories of this, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I
Sure.
think to this day, I still am, right? 30 years later,
30
I'm
years
still
later,
waiting
it's
for
like
someone to
somebody's
come
gonna
and
come
take it
in
all
to
away.
tell me none of that was real. You can't have any of that. Give it back.
I'm going to tell you a quick story. About a year or two after we had won that big pitch, I bought a Lamborghini,
No, I remember it.
right? Yeah. I went in the dealership and I got so hosed over this thing. Like I was like maybe 25, I don't remember. And I remember I went into the dealership and the finance manager, has me in his office. And he's like, price of the car, blah, blah, blah. And at the time, I didn't know anything about car leases, which is
Uh-huh.
ironic considering I'd be a CEO of a car leasing company. But but anyway, he's like, and your payment will be like $6,500 a month.
Uh-huh. You're like,
Just pause on
deal.
that. Yep. My mortgage at that point was $1,475 a month,
Yes.
right? To give you an idea of like the disparity
And
here.
rates weren't all that good back then, right?
No, and I had no credit, right? I was so young, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember my rate on that was like 9%, right?
Uh,
Just like expensive car, insane rates because nobody was financing a 25-year-old back then.
right.
And I remember a buddy of mine from back home in Connecticut was with me at the time to do this deal. And he was like, "Are you out of your mind?" And I was like, "Honestly, dude, I probably have this thing for 3 months and they repo it, right? There's no way a guy like me, right, is ever going to be
He's
able to
gonna
hold on
maintain
to
it.
this."
Yeah. I'm not gonna have to worry about what tires cost. We're not gonna
Yeah,
get that
exactly.
far.
I was like, it doesn't, am I going to look a difference? Because there's no way I'm ever going to be able to hold on to this, right?
Yeah.
But it goes back to my expectations.
Yeah.
My expectations were this is way beyond what I deserve.
Yeah.
And so when it didn't get repoed, I was like amazed,
Yeah.
right?
Feels great.
It feels great. And so I have always been very mindful of not only my expectations, but everyone else's as well. And I think where this starts, and I want to dig into this first, what I call the snowflake myth. The snowflake myth is basically saying, I'm a special snowflake. I'm going to start a company and it's going to
Yeah.
become IPO, Uber,
Right,
Amazon,
right,
whatever.
right.
And I deserve that,
Yeah.
right? How do you think about it? When you talk to founders, do you see the snowflake myth?
I do, and I think it comes from a couple of places. I want to talk about expectations and optimism. Right.
Okay.
So I think that there is a required degree of optimism when we're founding something because it doesn't exist yet. We have to be optimistic that we can figure out the 8 million problems that we know about and the 15 million that we haven't thought about yet.
Right.
And generally speaking, I don't think that founders suffer from a lack of optimism. I think we suffer from unpriced optimism, right? And that's where those
Unpriced optimism. I love that
expectations
phrase. Yeah,
come
yeah.
into play. So I think that this is where things start to go wrong. And I think that somehow we confuse those unreasonable expectations with that optimism. And when those two things start to get conflated, then all of a sudden, what seemed like, okay, this is what's going to drive us, this is going to be the force, this is our vision. Unreasonable expectations aren't motivation. They're self-sabotage at some level, right? They push bad decisions and then they punish you for just achieving what you were otherwise going to achieve anyways and should have been happy with. And so I think that's where this begins for me.
And there's a lot of this in our world in the
Yeah.
startup community. I mean, it's infiltrated with it at every possible level,
Yes.
right? So one of them is the de facto that when I go to raise money, I've got to be able to show investors that this could be that snowflake opportunity.
That's
right?
it.
I've got to show them that it could
Yep.
be the big IPO. But I've run the numbers on this every year just to see if this number has changed. But essentially, the probability that you'll be able to get a company to the public market versus the number of people that start companies
Yeah.
in just the US alone, which is by far the most fervent market where you're probable to do it, is 0.0003%. That's the probability that you're going to do what you said you're going to do. And there's 150 companies a year that do it.
Adding that percent to the end of it made it hurt a lot worse, Will. That added two more zeros. I thought we were just at that's
not,
that
not
that
enough
really
zeros.
sucks. Yeah, it's a lottery ticket with a pitch deck attached.
The reason we start here is so we can just use hard economics, right? It's like when somebody says, I want to grow from be president, you're not
Yeah.
going to, right? Well, I can, you can, but you will not, right?
Yep.
Like, or I want to play in the NBA. You can, but you will not. When people hear me say that, it pisses them off. They were
Yeah.
like, how dare you question someone's ability, to whatever. And I'm like, look, I'm not saying I don't hope you get there,
Right.
right? And I'm not saying don't try.
Right.
What I'm saying is don't expect,
Don't expect it. Yeah.
right? That's the danger.
Yeah.
Because when you set the expectation, you then are accountable to the failure of it. Okay.
You are. I mean, like, and I think maybe I should have said aspiration before. When I said optimism, I think optimism plays a role in this too. But aspiration is fine. Aspiration is fuel, right? But expectation becomes this debt, this blocker,
Exactly what I was
blinders,
going to use the
right?
word debt. Yeah.
Yeah, it becomes a debt, right? And I think that hope is fine, but certainty in most cases is delusion. You can't be certain about anything. And I think that's expectations are based in certainty, right? I should have this, therefore I will have this, right? I want this, and therefore I will get that. And that's just not the way this thing works.
And look, on the one hand, I love the fact that the snowflake myth exists because the idea that, we're all special in some way is wonderful, right? I think that's
Yeah.
wonderful. However, the difference in the startup world is where you just said it becomes a debt. And here's
Yep.
specifically the moment it becomes a debt. When you go to an investor and say, give me money, in exchange, I'm going to give you back this return, this return being the IPO, et cetera.
Yeah, yeah.
And now you owe that expectation. When you give stock options to your staff, right? Now you owe them that expectation.
Yeah.
That locks it in. And we're in a world
Exactly
where
it.
it changes the calculus
Yeah.
because you are accountable to that expectation.
That's it.
One of the things that I think, Ryan, we've done well at startups.com is we are very incremental in those expectations, right?
Yeah.
We look at the expectation and say, we would love to get to that, to that 0.0003%. However,
Yeah.
here are the other milestones that would also make us very happy,
That's it.
like being profitable, making payroll, crazy stuff. And I think because of that, we don't tie all of our happiness to a likely incalculable goal.
Right. And again, to your point, doesn't mean we're not aiming for that. Right. I
Right.
have to bring back my dad's quote, which was, aim for the moon, clear the fence.
Yep.
Right. Like it's fine to have that aspiration, but you still got to put in the work. I think the minute you replace, we're going to be a unicorn within a year to we're going to earn our next 3 wins, all of a sudden you're actually going to start to make progress because I don't know that anybody knows what it actually means to go be a unicorn. Like what
Right.
exactly is the checklist to get to that? Whereas go get next 3 clients has a checklist. We know what to do to go do that. Right.
Right. Well, and let's separate these two because I think this is where folks may be missing the point. Aspiration
Yep.
and expectation. They're
Yes.
not the same thing.
Not the same at all.
Aspiration is where I'd like to go. Expectation is where I expect to go.
Yep.
Right. Aspiration is it might happen. Expectation is it better happen. Right. Now, it doesn't have to be one or the other. For example, I can say this. I would like my company to be a unicorn. Right. Cool.
Yeah.
That's my aspiration. Nothing wrong with that. We're not knocking that. The difference is we're saying, but right now, I need to get to the company where it makes $1,000 a month.
That's it.
Right.
Yep.
My expectation is this thing has to get to $1,000 a month of revenue. It's the equivalent of saying I need to score a home run, but don't you want to get on first base first?
Yeah.
Nope. Just want home runs.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't quite work like that. But here's the difference. When we say, hey, if we get to $1,000 a month in revenue, which again, I know is peanuts, which is why I'm using that number. It's not that we pack our shit and go home. It's that we're like, okay, this is what $1,000 buys us. Doesn't buy us, not paying our salaries or anything else
Right,
like that.
right.
But it's proven the market a little bit. It gets us, to product market fit, maybe. And it allows us to start playing the does it scale game a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's an expectation. My expectation right now is I just want to make payroll. My expectation right now is I just want to get product market fit. My expectation right now is just I want to make enough money that I'm getting paid more than my last job. Like to me, those are very reasonable expectations, right? Even if the aspiration is, shoot for the moon.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You can have really, really high aspirations and then simply just base the work around practical things to get towards that outcome. When do you think that dreaming becomes most dangerous? What are the triggers? Is it fundraising? Is it hiring? Social comparison with other startups? Where do you think this
Sure.
starts to go off the rails?
I think it starts with time. And you and I deal with this all the time when we're
Yeah,
working with folks, and we deal with it in our own expectations.
sure.
I think founders, because they don't understand how this business works very well, why would you? You're probably doing it for the first time. This stuff takes a lot longer than people think it does.
Yep.
The myth around time, of course, is that, oh, well, within a year, we'll have product market fit, or the month we launch, we'll know right away whether the product's working, which works never. Or, within a year, we'll be profitable, or within 2 years, we'll have raised our next round, et cetera. I always like, look, man, I've been doing this for over 30 years.
Yep.
It does not work
Doesn't
like
work.
that.
You know what I've started to do, Will? Every time I hear these numbers from founders, I just apply dog years math to it. I'm like, okay, I think you multiply by 7 the first year, 6 the second, right? Just like that's the sad reality of it.
My rough math that I always use for people is what I call the 3x rule of time.
Mm,
However long you think it's going to take, just multiply it
just
by at least 3.
3x it. Yeah.
And I'll give you a couple of things. When I ask people, how fast did it take the fastest growing companies to get to the level they're at? Uber was one of the fastest growing companies. A lot of people don't realize LinkedIn was one of the fastest growing
Yeah, it
companies.
was.
Google was one of the fastest growing
Yep.
companies, right? I mean, these are the best of the best of Airbnb,
Right.
right? Total juggernaut. Do you know the time it took those companies to get to IPO was all over 10 years,
Yeah.
right?
Every
Those
one
are
of
the
them passed a decade
fastest
before getting to IPO.
growing
Yep.
companies in friggin' history,
Yeah.
right? Now,
But somehow
that's
5 years is your plan. Cool.
yeah, right.
Cool.
Look, there's all kinds of reasons why that happens, but when people are like, "Hey, we're starting this thing, we're 6 months into it, we don't know if it's working." I get that. Like in 6 months, you usually
Yeah, yeah.
don't know that it's working,
Yeah.
but you
How
need
would
at
you?
least a
Why
couple
are
more
you
years.
worried about that at that point? That'd be my
You don't know
question.
any better. And so I think this is an expectation. Hey, I'm already 18 months into this and we're not making any money.
Yep.
Yeah, you're not supposed to. It'd be great if you could,
Yeah.
right? But it takes way longer to be able to turn this thing around. But
Yeah.
people don't really know that.
No,
We
they
don't
don't.
talk about that much.
And that's why like the startup timelines from the early founders, they're fantasy. They're not forecasts. It's fiction, right? And that's okay. Their job's to go make that true. But I think the problem becomes again when there's expectations aligned with that and this sense of entitlement that because this is what we set out to do, this is what we're going to do. Again, you've got to believe that you're going to hit it, but you have to plan for not hitting it because statistically
Right.
you're not going to.
We're also in a business where time is a very critical element, in as much as when we go to raise capital, when folks raise capital, they're typically raising capital for an 18 to 24-month window, tops.
Yep.
Right. And the idea is that you're likely going to be out of money by then. That puts a very specific constraint on time. Like, dude, you're about to run out of money, right? Like, this thing either has to be successful or you are effed, right? And I think that puts us in a weird spot where we're constantly under the gun. We're also in a business, particularly among like a lot of the faster growing startups, where you happen to be competing with everybody else with the same idea
Yeah,
at
yeah.
exactly the same
Same
time.
time. Yep.
Let me zoom out a bit. Ryan, if you and I were starting call an ad agency right now,
Yep.
none of this would be on the table.
Correct.
Our speed of growth would not make a lick of difference.
Doesn't. Not at
Right.
all.
Like we're the first people to start an ad agency, right? Or friggin' any services business for that.
Any services business.
Right.
Yep.
We wouldn't be concerned whether we raised enough capital because there wouldn't be any.
Right.
Capital doesn't fund services businesses.
Yep.
And we would just year after year, month after month, look for deals, try to bring in clients, try to make money on it, try to go hiring around it. And it would take as long as it takes.
Yeah.
Again, the reason I'm bringing this up by comparison, and by the way, that's a very healthy expectation and pace. The reason I bring this up by startups by comparison is somewhere along the way, we're told that if we're not right in 18 months or 24 months, that we're a failure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
just
it's
not true.
like, not really.
Right.
Not really. So where how it works at all, actually.
Startups don't fail because they're slow. They
Right.
fail because founders panic at what would otherwise be normal speed, right? Because their expectation is that they should be going faster.
And look, and this isn't about like being productive in like, in getting your work done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ryan, you, me, and the rest of the team, we are productive as hell.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
But we also have a degree of patience. And I think this has been a hallmark for us for a very long time. We recognize how long things take to actually build.
Yeah.
We launched a new product last month, and our expectations for month one growth, I think, were very, conservative. But
Yeah.
by conservative, I mean realistic.
Yeah.
Right?
Realistic. Yeah.
Yep. And because of that, we're happy with it. And it's not because we set the bar so low that we could easily jump over it.
Right.
We know what the bar was supposed to be.
Reasonably. Yeah.
Right.
No, I think, look, if you start to expect miracles on a schedule, expect to start making really desperate decisions on a schedule too, right?
Yeah.
This is the problem. I think people, again, people's expectations are just so out of whack. I think the good news is getting out of your own head, getting off the whiteboard, getting out of your spreadsheet and talking to some other founders solves this most of the time. When you look around and everybody else goes, did you just say 3 years? And they're going like, you plan on 6. And you're like, well, what about you? You say same thing, same thing, same. Okay, so everybody here thinks it's going to take me 6 years. It's probably going to take me 6 years. But when all you have is the echo of your own voice in your head, how else are you supposed to have better expectations?
It's exacerbated by the fact that the mythology that surrounds our
Yes.
business, which is a big part of why we do this show, so folks can finally hear how things really go. If you're listening to a popular podcast where they're interviewing a founder, the reason that specific founder is getting interviewed is because they did something out of the norm,
Yeah.
right? Like, years ago when we interviewed Brian Chesky, right, from
Yeah.
Airbnb,
Yep.
he was interesting because he did something out of the norm.
Yeah.
Right? Bringing somebody on. How many freaking pitches do we get for people to come onto our show, onto our podcast? Which is
5 a
ironic because we
day.
don't have guests, right?
Yeah. Which I just have to call this out because maybe somebody will hear this. Maybe somebody will hear this. I love the pitches where they're like, I absolutely love the podcast. Your episode on whatever was amazing. I have this guest that you should check out. Like, if you love our podcast, you may or may not have noticed, you should have noticed that we don't do guests, but
Yeah,
still
right.
get offers every day. We're flattered, but we're not accepting.
I love the flattery though. But my point is, what you're hearing, as the kind of the outside narrative, is that startups grow at these incredible paces. You're
Yeah.
seeing either a huge funding round or huge outcomes, et cetera. And that is true for a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of startups. That
Yeah.
world actually does exist. And I got to say, I know a lot of those jokers, the founders behind those companies. And I say
Yep.
jokers because they're all great people. I've seen them do 7 other companies that had nowhere near the growth rate. This
Yeah.
one caught heat, and I've been at it too.
Yep.
I've had a moment where I've had a company catch heat and do really well. I've had companies that went nowhere at all. It's not nearly as controllable as people think it is. I would say reasonable growth is fairly controllable. Hyper growth, where you just hit lightning in a bottle, it's more found than discovered, right? Like you
Yeah.
you happen upon it, right? And I think for a lot of folks, the expectation of how much investment this takes from a time standpoint is really broken. When I sit down with founders and said, cool, you've got this new idea. It's going to take you about 10 years for it to become something.
Yeah.
Their heads explode.
I know. They don't want to hear that.
That's a really short period of time. And we're kind of in a spoiled world.
Yeah.
Ryan, if you went back to like our parents growing up, right?
Oh, yeah.
And told somebody you could be successful in 10 years starting a business, that'd be the opposite. They'd be like, that's unheard of.
Businesses they take multi-generations to become successful. Like my grandfather started it.
Right.
My father improved upon it, and we finally became profitable. And when we took it, right? That's the way it was. But yet
Right.
now we have this sort of instant gratification challenge. If you're thinking about because there's all kinds of timeline lies that we can tell ourselves, right?
Yeah.
From product to marketing to building credibility, building team. There's all kinds of timelines that we operate on.
Right.
Is there one that you think is more dangerous or more damaging in terms of the timeline lie for founders?
Something that's really funny about everything we talk about here is that none of it is new. Everything you're dealing with right now has been done 1,000 times before you, which means the answer already exists, you may just not know it, but that's okay. That's kind of what we're here to do. We talk about this stuff on the show, but we actually solve these problems all day long at groups.startups.com. So if any of this sounds familiar, stop guessing about what to do. Let us just give you the answers to the test and be done with it.
I think how long it takes to build a self-sustaining company, like a successful self-sustaining company.
Yeah.
And my answer is always 5 to 10 years. 5 if you're lucky, 10 if you're reasonable. Right.
Yeah.
And that seems to run in such stark contrast to what the expectations are, which is hilarious because I don't know where these expectations come from.
Right.
Right. Again, I equate it to, hey, I listened to Chesky on the podcast, but like by the time Chesky went public, he had been at it for 12 years.
Right.
Right. It didn't happen overnight.
Right. The overnight success. Right? We went from not being on the NASDAQ to being on the NASDAQ overnight, but the path up to that was quite long.
And even then, someone's going to be more cynical and they'll say, yeah, but that was when they went public, but they were wildly successful 5 years before that or 6 years before that. So it was really only a 6-year run. I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
And how many people actually get to that threshold? It's the Powerball mentality, right?
Yep.
Well, I only need one ticket to win. Yes, but the probability that you're going to win it is incredibly low.
Yeah.
So you don't want to invest all of your expectation on that outcome. You need to dial it back and say, what's a reasonable outcome for where I am now, and set the expectation around that.
Yeah. I think if I'm forced to pick one, it's the funding timeline. And I think there's two challenges with the funding timeline. It becomes a foregone conclusion that we will raise in 90 days, and it becomes a foregone conclusion that we will raise, right? Neither of those two things is certain. And yet I watch founders plan around this stuff. And I think, to me, that can be one of the most damaging lies that founders tell themselves when they're planning for those outcomes, both the time frame that it takes and the fact that they are certain to just go and raise that capital, because then they build the business around it. And they're like, well, who cares if the runway goes past 90 days, because that's all we need. That's when we're raising, and it's certain. And I think this is where people fall into one of many entitlement traps.
I'm a huge fan of the philosopher Ayn Rand, the author of Atlas Shrugged and a few other books. And she was as shrewd as they come. Like when you go back and you listen to her interviews and stuff, I mean, she is painfully shrewd.
Yes.
But one of the things that she would always say was, check your premises. Whenever you're not sure where you're at, check your premise. Like, how did you arrive at this place?
Yes.
Right? Like, what are the things that you thought were foundational knowledge that you based all of these expectations on, and were they actually true?
Right.
Check your premises. Hey, I think this thing should be successful in 3 years. Based on what?
Based on what?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Where did you get that foundational knowledge that sounded like it was statistically relevant, that you should be comfortable with that decision?
It's grounded in a very specific theory. Will, I have exactly 3 years before my spouse will kick me out of my house if it's not working by then.
I didn't get that part. That's actually very reasonable.
Yeah.
But I think here's what ends up happening. We get into what I'd call an entitlement trap.
Yeah.
An entitlement trap to me is, I deserve my expectations. I deserve my expectations because I expect them, right?
Yep.
And I was telling you before the show that I was talking to my wife about this last night, and I was talking about like the expectations and the entitlement of our kids.
Yeah.
And I said that I get the fact that, where I came from, being a poor kid, and where my kids are coming from being a not poor kid, are very different.
Yeah.
And so I don't have an entitlement trap because I don't feel entitled to anything, but they do.
They do.
They're great kids, right? Like incredibly kind and sweet and honest, right? But their expectation, their baseline is so much higher just by definition.
Yep.
And so when they go into this world and they have these expectations, and again, a lot of it's just implied. Like, we go on nice vacations. So when my kids go on a shitty vacation, which isn't even a shitty vacation, like, right? Like, they're going to be like, what a dump.
Yeah.
Right. Not because they're in a dump. Probably back
Just
then would have been the nicest
contrast.
vacation I ever went. Right,
Yeah.
right. But that's their comparison. I think the same thing happens with founders. I think founders are like, well, I believe this is going to be the next big thing, or I want to be, this next big thing.
Yeah.
So they feel entitled to that outcome and sorely disappointed when they don't get there, which is most of the time.
I think that's the challenge, right? And unfortunately, startups don't reward effort, right? There are no payouts. It doesn't guarantee any kind of an outcome. Startups pay for results, not your suffering, right? If only it were the other way around, we'd all be rich.
Let's build on that. We're used to jobs where you're supposed to be rewarded for hard work. If you work more hours, you get paid more.
Yep.
Right? So I think at a societal level, we feel a absolute entitlement to compensation for effort.
Yep.
If that's the way you feel, you're in the wrong business.
That's exactly it. Yeah. Time invested does not equal value delivered. And if there's no value delivered, your startup's not going to grow. It's not going to achieve anything.
Right. It's also your fault.
Yep.
Right. Which I think a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their heads around. Like, they're like, but I worked really hard at this. Did it work? No. That's your fault, right?
But you just stumbled across it. There is one thing we are absolutely entitled to as founders: accountability.
Accountability, right? Yeah, exactly.
That you are entitled to 100%.
I don't have like a lot of very strong ideologies, but one that is very, very strongly about is, you deserve nothing you didn't earn. You deserve nothing you didn't earn.
Yep.
And I got to tell you, not popular at cocktail parties.
Probably not. Yeah, depending on who your friend circle is made up of.
I was going to say, there's a lot of people with shit they didn't earn, right? And I feel I'm not a jerk about it. I'm not trying to like berate anybody about it. But conversely, I also feel very serious about what I have earned.
Yeah.
Right. In other words, I've put in the work and I've had the outcome and I've earned something. I feel 100% entitled to it.
Yeah.
What I don't feel entitled to is anything I didn't earn.
Anything else? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I look at it from the standpoint of this recently came up in my life, inheritance. I didn't inherit anything, but we had somebody else in our family that inherited an awful lot of money. Right. And they were arguing that it wasn't enough and all these things. Right. And I'm like, the guy who had to work for that
Yeah.
felt very differently about whether that was enough money. Right. And here you are getting it for free and complaining about it at the same time. And it just burns me, man, because I'm like, you didn't earn it. You
Right.
didn't earn it. And so you're not entitled to it. And I know, like, again, it does make the most charming person at cocktail parties sometime, although I keep wraps on it. I just talked to Sarah about it on the way home. Here's another example, and this is really going to make everybody hate me. When someone's kid talks about their family's wealth as if they earned it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
interesting that when you say kid, that can also be like a 45-year-old. I've run into those kids. Yeah.
And I'm like, listen, it's great that you have it. I don't, grudge you for having it, but you don't get to brag about it, right?
Yeah.
Like conversely, there's another guy that I know. Ryan, when you were over my house, did I show you that house that got built like across the way? It looks like a hotel.
You know what's funny? I was just talking to our mutual friend who happens to be visiting me right now about that exact house. Came up in an entirely different context, and we were laughing about it. Yep.
For folks listening, there just happens to be a guy that sold a company for like billions of dollars. And I live in Ohio, right? This is in Beverly Hills. Like, so the point is how bizarre this is.
Yes.
And he lives like across the street, not literally across the street, but like, whatever in sightline. And he built like a 50,000 square foot house.
It's the Petit Palace. Yeah. I mean, it is absolutely.
When you drive by it, it actually looks like a hotel. Anyway, that's not the point of my story. Last year, a year before, his son happened to be working out with me. Like, me and another founder were together working out. He joined us to work out. Nicest guy in the world. Right. And what I loved about him so much, they have this insane car collection. It's all over the internet, by the way. And, he kind of manages the car collection, among other things. Right. He's posting about it on Instagram and everything all the time. But the way he talks about it is in such reverence to his dad, which mad respect.
Yes.
Right. He's like, here's what my dad did. Here's how, he's clearly so respectful and he feels so rewarded by his dad, not entitled by him. Right.
Right.
And to me, I was
Big
like,
difference.
hallelujah, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm going to take this back to the sense of entitlement. We have this feeling that the world owes us something, that our startups owe us something.
Yeah.
And that is true to the extent that we've earned it and our output rewards it.
Yeah.
Here's an example. A buddy of mine goes out, he raises I think $70 million for a startup, puts like 10 years into it, which is a long time.
Yeah.
Right. And it kind of just goes sideways. Meaning, like, it's not that it totally blows up, but he's never going to get his money back out of it ever. And of course, he's bemoaning that fact. He's like, dude, I put 10 hard years into this, right? Yeah. Like, I feel like I deserve a lot more than I get. And I was like, I love you, but you don't deserve it. I said, it would be nice. You deserved it if you earned it, right? Like, if your output, you and I have plenty of efforts that we've put into things that yielded zero results, which means that's exactly what we've earned.
It's what we got back from it, and that's what we expect to get back from it. Yeah.
It sucks, but it also goes the other way, right? It goes the other way where when, I've got another buddy in my town, a friend of mine that you also knew, sold his company for $1 billion, right? Yeah. And families are interacting all the time. And every time I see him, I'm just so proud of him, right? Yeah. I'm like, you've earned every nickel of that.
Yes.
Right? It's an outsized outcome. You didn't expect it necessarily, but you did earn it. And you've earned every nickel. And one of the things that I always say to a founder when they've cashed out, and I'm hoping I'm not the only voice, but I get the sense that I am.
Sometimes it feels that way. You're like, you're the only person who said something nice to me about this. I'm like, I'm sorry to hear that.
I need you to hear this from at least one person.
Yeah.
You deserve every nickel that you just earned. You deserve every square foot of the house you just bought. You deserve every square inch of the car you just bought. You deserve what you've done. And Ryan, you know what's crazy? Almost 99% of the time, they're like, you're the only person who said that.
Oh, everyone else is looking at them with jealousy or skepticism or you name it, right? Like, it's tough. It's tough. But again, Lord knows how. Entitled to that person's outcome. They're like, well, why couldn't that have been me? because it wasn't a lottery ticket. This wasn't up to random chance. This was up to somebody putting their pants on the line every single day and doing something to earn it.
Different if they're a Powerball winner, but this ain't that, right? So here's what I think. I think the key for us, as founders, is we've got to set reasonable expectations.
Yeah.
I think the expectation battle for founder mentality is real. I think it's real.
I'm going to go back to the thing at the very beginning about the optimism, right? You're told you're constantly in pitch mode as a founder, right? And you're constantly having to say things that aren't quite yet true, right? You're projecting out to this future. And you want to make everybody else believe it's true, and then somewhere along the way, you start to believe it's true, and then you start to feel entitled to that outcome. Question for you, Will. One of the things that I'm curious about, because we do run into this all the time, before we get to setting the reasonable expectations, how are we able to help a founder understand that they're not entitled without crushing them? Because I feel like some of the stuff we've said today, it's kind of heavy, and some of them are out there going like, well, how am I supposed to feel, right? Like, you guys are just being mean. What am I supposed to do? How do you tell a founder that you're just not entitled in a way that doesn't completely deflate their balloon?
You're entitled to your next milestone, right?
Yeah.
If you earn it, right? So if we're torturing the baseball analogy, right now your only focus and your only expectation is to get on first base. Now, that doesn't mean your aspiration isn't to go further.
Yeah.
Right. But you haven't even gotten onto first base. So talking about how you've got a home run in the works is bullshit. One of the most famous cases I see on a daily basis is whenever anybody raises capital. And like, oh, look at this. We won with a huge valuation. We raised a bunch of money. I was like, you haven't sold a goddamn thing.
You haven't. And you just added a massive liability, and you have less equity now. Congrats.
Yeah. I was like, you haven't earned a goddamn thing.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. It's hard to raise capital. I'm not knocking the milestone. What I'm saying is don't replace that with market success.
Yeah.
Right. Like all you've done is create liability. You still have to turn that into actual success. And statistically, you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So like a typical VC, if they have 20 portfolio companies, and mind you, this was the best of the best of the best of the best that made it to that point to get that investment, 18 of those will likely fail.
Yep.
Right. That's the best of the best, theoretically being vetted by the best of the best. Right. And still 18 are going to fail. Not 2 are going to fail just like through some weird happenstance.
Right. No. Most of them. The vast majority.
And so in every case, they said, oh, we've got the money, the expectations, blah, 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 IPO, because it's on almost literally every pitch deck. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, what would have been a really cool expectation? I don't know, profitability, self-sustaining, a business model, selling anything, like actually
selling anything,
generating revenue, right? And I think when we start to align our expectations with what we can actually achieve, and this isn't about lowering the bar, it's about setting milestones.
Say that again, right? We're not saying to just aim low, aim small, and because reasonable expectations aren't a single destination. They're just a compounding ladder. We're just saying build towards that next point and then continue to build from there.
I'll give you a real world example because you and I were just talking about this. We're launching a new product. We just launched a new product weeks ago. And our initial expectation is that we want to sell $200 a day of this product.
Yep.
Okay. Now, pause right there. Most people, when they hear this, in fact, I had to explain this to my family at the dinner table, why $200 was so meaningful to us.
Yeah.
Right. And my daughter, who's 14, she's smart as hell. She's like, Dad, that doesn't sound like a lot of money. And I was like, it's not. That's not the goal. I'm not saying $200 and let's go home.
Right.
I'm saying my expectation is $200 until we get to $200.
Yeah.
Because me saying it's $200,000 a day, who cares?
Yeah.
Funny, that's not my problem
thing about
right now.
200,000, you have to pass through 200 to get there, right?
Right.
You have to pass that. So
right.
I think that's the thing, right? Short windows, aggressive and realistic outcomes. I'd much rather see every founder out there trade one heroic goal for 10 achievable wins, because that turns into heroics at the end.
The example I always use with founders that I think resonates with everybody, so I'll use it again. Whenever I want to lose weight, I never talk about a goal that I want to lose. I never say that I want to lose 15. I know that I want to lose 15 pounds, let's say.
Yeah.
Right. I know that's ultimately the goal. But I have to lose 1 pound. So I always say this. Whenever I'm trying to go on a diet or whatever, my goal is to lose 1 pound.
Yeah.
And people look at that, well, that just seems like a stupid, slow goal that you can't get. Yeah. Not if I can't get past it.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like it's easy to say this is my goal.
Yeah.
A lot harder
It's
to
just
pull it off.
virtue signaling, right? I'm going to lose 50 pounds. Not
Right.
until you lose one.
And to be fair, I haven't been able to lose 15 pounds in 20 years. So clearly, the fact that I had this big expectation and
Yeah.
entitlement, right, wasn't helping. The key is to be able to say, I'm not entitled to that outcome until I've earned that 1 pound, right?
Yeah.
Until I somehow stopped eating delicious pizza. And I look at this saying, it's okay to have the 15-pound goal or whatever your goal is, right? Whatever your goal is, so long as you understand that you have to earn it one increment at a time.
Yeah, and I think there's so much to be said for that too. And it is also it's about the earning, but it's also just about being able to actually do it and being able to tell that you're doing it. I watch
Correct.
so many founders on a weekly basis who have set a goal that is so far away from where they are now that they can't tell that they're moving towards it. I had two
Huge
calls
problem.
like this week
Huge
where
problem.
I started to look into stuff with them. I was like, okay, so you're making progress. And they went, well, not really. And I went, yeah, really. Like last week you didn't do this. This week you did, right? You've got some sales this week.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yep.
but the goal is this. It's like, well, who set the damn goal?
Yep.
Like, why is that the goal? And so it just makes it really, really hard for them to even understand that they're doing the right things and heading in the right direction because they've set the marker so far away that the apparent distance isn't changing at all. And that's really problematic.
I remember specifically, Ryan, remember when I moved to Beverly Hills,
I do.
right? And I remember sitting on the back porch with my wife, Sarah,
Did
and
both of you fit out there?
it's not a big place, but we're like on top of a mountain, right? Like it's this beautiful place.
Yeah.
But the
Oh, it was
problem with
gorgeous.
being
The
on
views
top
were,
of that mountain, yeah,
yeah.
right, was that we could see the houses on the other side of the mountain.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And they were way bigger, like way, 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 way
Yeah.
bigger. And I remember I was telling Sarah, I was like, this makes me feel like a giant loser. And I said, before we get to that, I
Yeah.
want to point out that I'm in goddamn Beverly Hills right now.
Yeah.
Like I am
My
quite
$10
literally at the
million
top of the
house
food
is
chain.
so stupid. Right. I
Right,
hate it.
right. And I'm like, and I'm sitting here going, how messed up is this?
Uh-huh.
Right? Like I grew up on welfare
Yeah.
for Christ's sake.
Y-
Right? I'm
right.
sitting on top of a mountain, right? Let me play this out. Every morning, we had these like floor to ceiling windows that overlooked like this mountain, right? And again, in all the other houses. Every morning, I would look at all the other houses across the valley,
Uh-huh.
and I'd be like, no matter what I do today, I will never have that.
Never have one of those.
Right?
Yeah.
That guy has it, right?
Yeah.
And that guy has it, but it'll
Yeah.
never be me.
Not
And
me.
it was
Yeah.
so disheartening.
Yeah.
And again, I'm a pretty pragmatic guy. So I wasn't like, oh, I'm entitled to all of, I'm like, dude, I didn't know how I got here. But my point was, I was like, because it had created this new expectation that I didn't
Yeah.
have 5 minutes ago, it was making me really unhappy.
Yeah. That's it though. Right. I said at the top, it's reality divided by expectations. Right. So
Right.
if your reality is a $10 million house, that's fine until you start dividing it by the $150 million houses. All of a sudden, it seems kind of shit. Right. It wasn't until then.
And I remember being like, at some point, I was like, fuck this.
Yeah.
Right. And I knew it wasn't going to go away. I'm sure a stronger, more mentally stable person would have just been somehow like would have figured it out on their own.
Yeah.
But I wasn't that person.
No.
And we pulled the stakes and moved back to Ohio. I was like, I've never been happier.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because I lowered the bar. We actually ended up building a more expensive house. It wasn't because I lowered the bar. It was because I realized that my expectations were getting far beyond my needs, far beyond like my capabilities.
Yes.
The guy that built the house across the mountain, like founded Disney or founded, it's been Walt Disney,
Right.
but like, or in this case specifically was Channing Tatum, right?
Yeah.
Like he and I definitely didn't have the same career arc. So that's why he has the big house and I have the
Right.
little house. Like there's no way I'm going to be able to replicate what that guy did, right? And again, this mechanism that artificially changes my expectations to a point where I'm making myself miserable is the point. I should have been like a pig in shit over this whole situation.
Yep.
And I wanted to be, and I wasn't because again, expectations were all broken.
Yeah. Once those expectations are out of line, then you start to you're impatient, you're dissatisfied, you become anxious, right? All these things, and you can't just be happy with what you've already achieved. Or, and I think that there's that aspect, right? Which is you were saying there being like saying, I'm not happy with what I've achieved. The one that also saddens me is when I'm watching founders, like the two that I talked to this week, who had started to achieve something hadn't even realized it because the expectation that they set was so far out of line with the reality of their current business. And so they weren't even able to see that they were achieving success, let alone be happy with it.
Right. And again, because we don't have a good barometer, we
Yep.
don't have a good meter to be able to say, hey, exactly how far along am I, compared to others? We did an episode years ago on this where we talked about it's hard for us to know whether we're getting ahead because we
Yeah.
can't really calibrate to our peers.
Yep.
And in the startup world, even our peers don't know like how far along they are.
Yeah.
If you are making payroll, you are geometrically ahead of most founders, right? If you are profitable, you are geometrically ahead of those that are just making payroll.
Yeah.
Like when you get to that point, I think this was the premise of that episode. When you get to the point where you've built a profitable company, you're in a fraction of companies that ever actually make it there. But you feel like shit because like, but we only make like $100,000 a year. Yes, I get that.
Yeah.
But you also have to realize that like that is a massive milestone. I understand it's not paying all the bills. I understand it's like you being happy doesn't like make it worth twice as much.
Yeah.
But you got to at least have some gratitude for what that milestone means.
I've found in my life that when I'm aiming for something bigger, if I am not grateful for all of the little steps along the way, I don't get to that big thing. I've tried it, right? I've tried it. I tried to just aim big and only do big. And at some point you start to realize that those big outcomes actually come from just stacking small earned expectations long enough for the reality to catch up to the dream. And that actually feels really good. And you get to enjoy it along the way too, which is, I think, something that so many founders are just not doing right now. They're deferring happiness. And I can promise you there is no interest earned on that account. and so just, aim a little small. Look, aim big, but act small and just take those little wins and keep stacking them up. Be grateful for them as they come. And then those are the springboard. That is the step that you use to take the next leap. And that's fine.
Yep. And I think we are in the business of expectations. I mean,
100%.
quite literally, startups are in the business of expectations, both for ourselves and for the people around us. Now, I think when we set those expectations, it's with good intentions in mind. We want to build great things in the world. And by all means, do that. By all means, have that aspiration to build big things. But in order to build big things, we have to build small things to get there. And, in order to move a mountain, we got to do it one pebble at a time. And I think part of our expectations have to be, I will get there. I will get there through a series of successive wins. I will be frigging relentless with my successive wins. But I'm not entitled to the big win unless I win every single time, day in and day out. The way to win the big game is to win every single game leading up to it. And that's how you actually become a champion in this business.
Overthinking your startup because you're going it alone? You don't have to, and honestly, you shouldn't, because instead, you can learn directly from peers who've been in your shoes. Connect with bootstrapped founders and the advisors helping them win in the Startups.com community. Check out the Startups.com community at www.startups.com to see if it's for you. Could be just the thing you need. I hope to see you inside.